What if human civilization has been destroyed and rebuilt before? What if 12,800 years ago, something from space hit Earth so hard it erased an entire advanced civilization from history? In 2007, scientists found something disturbing in the geological record. A thin black layer of sediment dating to exactly 12,800 years ago. Found at sites across North America, Europe, and the Middle East. This layer contains shocked quartz, melted glass, microscopic diamonds, and massive amounts of soot. The kind of evidence you only see after one thing, a cosmic impact. But here's what makes it terrifying. This wasn't just an impact. It was multiple impacts. Fragments of a comet hitting Earth in a planetary bombardment that lasted for days, maybe weeks. The heat was so intense, it instantly melted a mile of ice covering North America. The resulting floods were biblical. The extinction was catastrophic. 75% of North America's large mammals vanished. Mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant sloths, all gone. And human populations? They crashed too. This event has a name, the youngerdryas, a 1,200-year period of sudden, extreme cold that hit right when Earth was warming up after the Ice Age. Temperatures plunged. Ice sheets that were melting started growing again. Sea levels rose and fell erratically, and civilizations, if any existed, were wiped from the planet. Most archaeologists say human civilization began after this event, around 10,000 BC, when agriculture started, when the first cities appeared, when writing developed. But what if that's not the beginning? What if that's the restart? What if there was something before, something advanced, that got completely erased when the sky fell? I'm the ancientologist, and I spend my time uncovering the parts of history they don't teach in school. Today, we're exploring the youngerdryas impact hypothesis, examining the evidence that a cosmic catastrophe reset human civilization, and investigating whether an advanced culture existed before and was completely destroyed. Hit subscribe, because what you're about to discover suggests we're not the first. 1. The impact when the sky fell. Let's start with what actually happened 12,800 years ago, because the evidence is overwhelming that something catastrophic occurred. Scientists call it the youngerdryas boundary layer. You can see it most clearly at Murray Springs in Arizona. It's a dark band in the Earth, about the width of a human hand. It runs through dozens of sites across North America and has been found in Europe, the Middle East, and as far south as Antarctica. This layer contains specific markers called impact proxies, things you only find after massive cosmic collisions. Shocked quartz, created when rock is compressed at extreme pressure. Melted spherules, tiny glass beads formed when materials are heated above 2,200 degrees Celsius. Nanodiamonds, created only under conditions of enormous heat and pressure. And platinum, rare on Earth, but common in asteroids and comets. Above this layer, you find abundant animal bones and human artifacts. Below it, almost nothing. The layer marks an extinction event. The youngerdryas impact hypothesis, developed by over 60 scientists across multiple disciplines, proposes that Earth passed through a debris field from a fragmenting comet. Not one impact, hundreds, maybe thousands, across the entire planet. The culprit was likely a comet over 100 kilometers in diameter that entered the inner solar system around 20,000 years ago. As it orbited the Sun, it broke apart, creating a debris stream we now call the Torrid meteor stream. Earth still passes through this stream twice a year, in June and late October. 12,800 years ago, Earth passed through an unusually dense part of this stream. Multiple fragments, some hundreds of meters across, hit the atmosphere. Most exploded in airbursts before reaching the ground, like the 1908 Tunguska event in Siberia that flattened 2,000 square miles of forest. but some fragments were larger, big enough to punch through the atmosphere and strike the North American ice cap, a 2-mile thick sheet of ice covering Canada and the northern United States. When superheated fragments hit ice that thick, the results are catastrophic. The ice doesn't just melt, it liquidizes, instantly. Millions of cubic kilometers of water released in hours. Imagine tsunamis of meltwater over 1,000 feet deep, rushing across the continent, moving at 200 to 300 million cubic feet per second. More water than every river on Earth flowing today, all at once. This sudden injection of fresh water into the North Atlantic shut down the Gulf Stream, Earth's climate regulation system. Temperatures plunged globally. The world, which had been warming for 2,000 years, suddenly became as cold as the peak ice age. In some places, this happened literally overnight. The impacts also threw superheated ejecta into the upper atmosphere. This material fell back to Earth still burning, setting continental-scale wildfires. The amount of soot in the boundary layer suggests forests across entire continents burned simultaneously. This is why the extinction was so complete. It wasn't just the impacts. It was the flooding, the fires, the sudden climate shift, and the collapse of food chains all happening at once. 2. The extinction. What died? The youngerdryas extinction was devastating. In North America, 75% of large mammal species vanished, not gradually over thousands of years, within decades. Gone were mammoths and mastodons that had survived multiple ice ages, saber-toothed cats, American lions, dire wolves, giant ground sloths, American camels, horses, and giant beavers the size of bears. Over 35 genera of megafauna completely disappeared. In Europe and Asia, similar extinctions occurred, though not quite as severe. Woolly rhinos disappeared, cave bears, giant elk. The pattern was global, but worst in North America, right at the impact zone. But it wasn't just animals. Human populations crashed. Archaeological sites that had been continuously occupied for centuries were suddenly abandoned. Stone quarries that had been mined for generations went unused. Campsites were left empty. The Clovis culture of North America vanished entirely from the archaeological record. These were the people who had dominated the continent for over 1,000 years, leaving behind distinctive spear points found from Alaska to Central America. After 12,800 years ago, no more Clovis points appear. Some archaeologists argue the Clovis people simply evolved into other cultures, but the timing is suspicious. Their disappearance coincides exactly with the impact evidence and the megafauna extinctions. Even more disturbing is what happened to population sizes. Genetic studies show a significant bottleneck in North American populations around this time. As if most people died, and only small groups survived to repopulate the continent. The site of Abu Huraira in Syria shows direct evidence of destruction. Located 150 miles from Göbekli Tepe, this settlement was obliterated 12,800 years ago. The remains show clear signs of an airburst. Melted glass, shocked quartz, high-temperature minerals. The buildings were destroyed. Interestingly, the site was reoccupied within about 5 years, suggesting survivors returned. But here's what's crucial. If a relatively small village like Abu Huraira could be completely destroyed, what would happen to a larger civilization? To cities? To accumulated knowledge? To any advanced culture that existed before this event? Everything would be gone. Buildings collapsed or burned. Knowledge holders killed. Survivors scattered and focused entirely on staying alive. Within a generation or two, memories of what came before would fade. Within a few centuries, it would become myth. 3. The climate chaos, 1,200 years of hell. The immediate impacts were catastrophic, but what came after might have been worse. The Younger Dryas period itself lasted 1,200 years, from 12,800 to 11,600 years ago. More than a millennium of climate chaos. Temperatures dropped dramatically. In some regions, 15 degrees Celsius colder within a decade. Glaciers that had been retreating started advancing again. Ice sheets regrew. The Arctic ice cap expanded southward, but it wasn't a simple freeze. It was instability. The climate system was broken. You had rapid swings between extreme cold and brief warm periods. Monsoons failed. Rainfall patterns shifted. Rivers changed course or dried up entirely. The megafauna that survived the initial impacts couldn't adapt to such rapid changes. Their food sources disappeared. Migration routes were blocked by advancing ice or rising seas. They starved or were hunted to extinction by desperate humans. Human populations that survived did so by becoming incredibly adaptive. They couldn't rely on any single food source because climate shifts would destroy it within years. They had to remain mobile, moving constantly to find resources. Any attempt at agriculture would have been nearly impossible. You can't plant crops if the climate changes drastically every few years. You can't build permanent settlements if flooding or drought can strike at any time. This explains why agriculture seems to appear suddenly around 10,000 BC. Not because humans suddenly got smarter, because the climate finally stabilized enough to make farming viable. The Younger Dryas ended as abruptly as it began. Around 11,600 years ago, temperatures shot back up. Within decades, Earth was warmer than it had been before the impacts. The ice sheets collapsed rapidly, causing another pulse of sea level rise called Meltwater Pulse 1b. This final flood may have drowned any remaining coastal settlements. Any survivors of the initial catastrophe who had rebuilt along new coastlines would have been forced to relocate again as waters rose another 10 to 20 meters. By the time stability returned, humanity had been through over 1,000 years of climate hell. Multiple generations had lived and died knowing nothing but chaos. Any memory of what came before would have become legend, myth, or been lost entirely. 4. The lost civilization. What if? Now let's ask the controversial question. What if an advanced civilization existed before the Younger Dryas and was completely destroyed? When we say advanced, we're not talking about a civilization identical to ours, not skyscrapers and computers, but a culture that had achieved certain things: sophisticated navigation, advanced astronomy, monumental architecture, long-distance trade, and complex social organization. The evidence is circumstantial, but intriguing. Ancient maps called portolanos suddenly appeared in Europe after the Crusades. These maps show remarkable accuracy in relative longitudes, something European civilization didn't achieve until the mid-1700s with Harrison's chronometer. More strangely, some portolanos show Antarctica with ice-free coastlines, matching what the continent looked like before it was covered by ice sheets. Other maps show Indonesia as a single landmass, which was true during the Ice Age when sea levels were lower. These maps are supposedly based on ancient source maps that the cartographers copied, but which no longer exist. Where did these source maps come from? The portolano makers themselves didn't know. They just copied them. Could they have originated with a pre-Younger Dryas civilization that had mapped the world during the Ice Age? There's also Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, built around 9,500 BC. This is a massive complex of carved megaliths arranged in circles, some stones weighing 20 tons. The sophisticated carving, astronomical alignments, and sheer organizational effort required suggest the builders weren't simple hunter-gatherers who just invented agriculture. They were people who already knew how to work stone on a monumental scale. who understood astronomy well enough to encode it in their structures, who could organize labor for projects that took decades. Where did this knowledge come from? Did they inherit it from an earlier civilization? Randall Carlson, a geologist who studies the Younger Dryas, points out that massive floods carved geological features across North America that conventional geology can't explain. The channeled scablands in Washington state show evidence of catastrophic floods that move billions of cubic feet of water per second. These features match exactly what you'd expect from the rapid melting of continental ice sheets. They're evidence of the cataclysm, but they also suggest that any structures, cities, or settlements in the path of these floods would have been completely obliterated, scoured down to bedrock. If a civilization existed in North America before 12,800 years ago, we wouldn't find traces of it. The floods would have erased everything. We'd only find evidence in places the floods didn't reach, or buried under hundreds of feet of sediment. The worldwide flood myths add another layer. Nearly every culture has a story of a great flood that destroyed the world. Noah's Ark, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Hindu story of Manu, Greek myths of Deucalion. The Younger Dryas actually happened. The floods were real. The catastrophe was global. Are these myths just descriptions of local floods, as mainstream archaeology claims? Or are they cultural memories of an actual global event? An event so traumatic it became embedded in human storytelling across every continent? 5. The reset, starting over. Whether an advanced civilization existed before or not, one thing is certain: the Younger Dryas reset humanity. Whatever progress had been made, whatever knowledge accumulated, was largely lost. The survivors faced a world fundamentally altered. The megafauna they hunted were extinct or dying. The climate was unstable. Their population numbers were devastated. Simply surviving day to day consumed all their energy. For over 1,000 years, humans lived in survival mode. Small, mobile groups. No permanent settlements. No time or resources for monumental construction or advancing knowledge. Just staying alive. Then around 11,600 years ago, the climate stabilized. Within a few centuries, agriculture appeared independently in multiple regions. The Fertile Crescent, China, Mesoamerica, the Andes. Almost simultaneously, humans transitioned from hunter-gatherers to farmers. Was this coincidence? Or were people finally able to apply knowledge that had been passed down through the dark millennium? Knowledge of domestication, cultivation, and settlement that predated the Younger Dryas? By 9,500 BC, Göbekli Tepe was under construction. By 7,000 BC, Çatalhöyük in Turkey was a city of thousands. By 3,500 BC, Sumer had writing. By 3000 BC, Egypt was building pyramids. This progression seems remarkably fast. From scattered survivors to complex civilizations in just 8,000 years. Either humans evolved their capabilities incredibly quickly, or they were rebuilding, relearning, recovering knowledge that had been lost. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis doesn't just explain the extinction of the megafauna. It doesn't just explain the sudden climate shift. It explains why human history seems to begin so recently. Why all our cities, our writing, our monuments date to after 10,000 BC. Not because nothing came before, but because everything before was destroyed. We are not necessarily the first advanced civilization on Earth. We might be the second, or the third, or the latest in a cycle of rise, catastrophe, and rebuilding that has repeated multiple times. The geological record shows Earth has been hit by cosmic impacts many times. The dinosaurs were wiped out 66 million years ago, but there have been dozens of smaller impacts since. Any one of them could have destroyed a developing civilization. If another cosmic impact occurred today, what would survive? Our cities would collapse. Our electrical grids would fail. Knowledge stored digitally would be lost. Within a few generations, survivors might forget how to make concrete, steel, or computers. Within a few centuries, we'd be myths. What do you think? Did the younger Dryas destroy an advanced civilization? Or did it simply reset hunter-gatherer populations? Drop your theory in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.